The name's Stack. D-Stack. I prefer my iced coffee shaken, not stirred. Today on Stack and Mac, we're watching Goldeneye, starring Pierce Brosnan.
And The American President, starring Michael Douglas and Annette, where we learn that America isn't easy. Stay tuned. Stack and Mac. Stack and Mac. Looking back on movies.
Goldeneye came out in 1995, the same year as everything else we're reviewing, and it finds James Bond trying to track down an evil post-Soviet Russian general who's stolen the codes to a post-Soviet secret space weapon called Goldeneye. Try saying that 5 times fast.
That makes total sense.
And then in the end, it's not even the Soviet general, but his old friend and pal 006, played by Sean Bean, who's just gonna rob a bank in London. So, yeah.
He even says to Sean Bean, "You're just a bank robber.
You're just a bank robber.
You're just a bank robber."
And it was way too complex, as all 007 James Bond entries are. But at the same time, it's a lot of fun.
But it's easy because it's James Bond.
It is easy. So what did you think? This is
the second James Bond film I've ever seen in my life.
What did you take away from it?
I can see why they're popular. I thought that this movie had tonal inconsistencies for me. I expected this exciting, just nail-biting kind of movie because you hear about the James Bond films all the time. People love them. They're revered. And it was a little cheesy for me from the get-go. And so I expected something different. But once I bought into the cheesiness, I actually sort of enjoyed myself for the most part watching it. A little long, a little too many, this came out of nowhere. Like when they ended up at Cuba at the end, I was like, this looks like Jurassic Park.
Well, this is
to me.
For me, the big two things I always say from a James Bond film, they're always 20 minutes longer than they need to be.
Yeah, I could see that, yeah.
And they always end up ending in a completely different scenario or setting.
Right,
than the
okay,
opening credits.
yeah.
I haven't seen this movie in probably 20 years.
I've never seen it, so...
I will say, for our generation, we grew up playing Goldeneye, and so many of my references and memories are from the video game, and half the time I'm like, oh, that's where the setting came from, or oh, that's where that level design came from. The very beginning, though, probably one of the best cold opens, him running down a dam and just bungee jumping off, as you do in the 90s.
You mean when he flew through air without anything to, guide him into the plane, and he opened up the plane door and he was able to fly it at the last second? So he's Superman.
He kind of
James Bond is Superman. That's really what we learned from the opening.
A 1 in 2 billion chance of him actually surviving.
And of course he survived.
Of course he did.
Of course he survived. He's James Bond.
Sean Bean dies right at the beginning.
Typical Sean Bean role, yes.
Does he? Doesn't move.
I don't know.
So obviously the thing I couldn't get is obviously the pistol is firing blanks.
Right.
But 006 is so into his character that when all of the chemical cans fall out, he doesn't move.
No, he doesn't move at all. It doesn't hurt him at all. It's like when the plane lands on Cuba, lands on the island in Cuba, and 007 doesn't have a scratch on him.
Or neither does Natalia.
Yeah, but she at least passes out from it. He's fine. The windows are busted, half the plane's gone, and Pierce Brosnan's just glistening in the sun and stuff. It's so unrealistic. You'd think maybe he hurt his brain with his thumb or something.
He's James Bond and he survives everything. In terms of casting though, James Bond, Pierce Brosnan, he's now synonymous with that character.
Right,
when anybody thinks of Pierce Brosnan now, that's the first thing they think of.
Yeah, I thought Pierce Brosnan was pretty good in this film. I actually really enjoyed him. I thought he was believable. He wasn't too overconfident. He was serious. I enjoyed his performance in this for the most part.
Do you like Judi Dench?
I love Judi Dench.
Do you like her playing M?
Considering I have no frame of reference as to someone else being M, I do think that she did a very good job. I think that she could have given a little bit more screen time just as far as introducing kind of the character that she was. who she was, which I've been, like, in what I've read and heard and stuff, really comes to the forefront in the new
Skyfall.
Yeah.
She gets like
where she gets a lot of really good meaty scenes to do. But I think Judi Dench is a fantastic actress, so I did really appreciate seeing her. I think she did a good job.
So this movie came out 6 years after the last Bond film. So this restarted the franchise. Everybody wanted to be a part of it. It was the fourth highest grossing film of 1995. It was a big deal. And it's like a lot of those big blockbuster movies that don't necessarily hold up as good cinema today. They were an event. And when I think of Goldeneye in 1995, it was
I could see that.
An event. Every Bond era has its film that kind of sums up whether it's the 60s or the 70s, and even going into the 80s. But really, Goldeneye is the reason we have 3 more crappy Bond films.
Well, I guess we'll find out. I haven't seen any of those either.
They're not worth watching. I mean, for me, if any of them were going to hold up out of the 4, Pierce Brosnan, I thought this would be the one. But at the end of it, I don't know. The corny one-liners are kind of big in James Bond. That kind of took me out of it. Some of the escape scenarios, like every time. There was 4 times where I was like, just shoot him. Just shoot Bond. Stop explaining everything you're about to do. Shoot him in the face.
Well, it started at the beginning when there were, like, the whole Russian army had, 35 rifles facing him, and he used that cart to block himself with it, and not a one of them thought, maybe if we just went around behind him, we could circle him, and maybe we could get him that way. It just seemed silly. There are parts of this film that are very silly to me.
The biggest thing that kind of takes you out of it, and I don't know why they did this, and if there isn't a bigger example of us winning the Cold War, all the Russians speak English. Even in their private cabinet meetings, they're all speaking English.
Yes.
At least in The Hunt for the Red October, they started out speaking Russian, and then they zoom in on their mouths and zoom out and they're speaking English. I thought that's an interesting way to do it, but not in Goldeneye. Goldeneye is straight up everyone speaks English.
Everyone speaks English. Moderate to good accents-ish. I couldn't tell if Famke Janssen's character was French or Russian or American. She kind of spoke with all 3 of them given the scene.
Yeah.
And I could not figure out what her deal was. And her character in general, I thought was strange. She enjoyed suffocating guys with her legs.
Yeah, on its own.
Yeah, it was just weird. And then when she died, it was like, here she is on this tree. Just like, whoa.
I couldn't figure out how, after the scene in the spa where they're love making.
Love fighting, or...
So they're naked.
in a spa.
They're naked, but then 5 seconds later they're in the car and he's got a gun on her, and I'm like, how did they get dressed?
I was thinking the same thing. It's like
he holding a gun
and watched her get dressed, and then it's just silly. I mean, there's just stuff in it that are just silly.
But again, we're talking about a franchise that started off with From Russia with Love, where the camouflage is Sean Connery. He's got a crab on his head when he comes out of the water. That was part of his camouflage. It's always been campy. It's always been silly.
And then Sean Bean drops 600 feet at the end.
He just broke his leg.
He just broke his leg. But it was the thing that fell on top of him, but really just the empty part fell on top of him because the rest of it fell down around him, but apparently that's what killed him. I don't know. I can do camp, but I don't know if they really set out to make a campy film.
I think they did. I definitely think they did. I mean, it's just part of the Bond franchise. And, I mean, it's interesting you bring up the soundtrack. To me, the soundtrack is ingrained in my head because of the hours of playing GoldenEye, the video game, that kind of industrial synth. And this is probably the movie with the most number of ricochets I've ever heard in a film. Every time somebody's shooting, they're shooting at metal, and it's just bouncing off the walls. I mean, 45 minutes of the soundtrack are machine guns ricocheting bullets off of metal. My favorite part is Bond behind that rack.
I mean, it's just so silly. I mean, the most realistic thing in this film was...
I can't really think of...
Okay, maybe if you wreck your plane on an island in Cuba, part of the wing will fall off.
Or the whole thing will... I like it how if Bond had shot his little Walther PPK at a plane a mile up, it would have exploded.
Right.
And they come down with a machine gun, and a little fire in the background are able to land it. Another thing that's interesting, and I know you might not know this because you don't watch as many Bond films.
No.
But the Bond car is always a thing. Like, they introduced the Bond car.
They always been sponsored by BMW?
No.
Okay.
That was
all
a
right.
big, that was a big
new.
deal.
Okay. All right.
So the car that he is driving in the beginning of the film is the infamous DB5, the Aston Martin that Sean Connery made famous in Goldfinger. And I think to kind of spark things and be like, hey, this is the Bond for the new era, but we're going to pay homage.
Right.
He's driving in that sexy Ferrari 335, driven by Annette comes, and they have the sweet, weird chase in the Alps, because they're outside of Monaco.
Yes, and there was like a bunch of cyclists riding up a mic.
Yeah, they just kind of served as a gag. I feel like that was dumb.
Yeah.
But so they introduce a BMW Z3, which is brand new. Talk about a marketing strategy. You have James Bond driving that car, and he doesn't drive the car, but for 5 minutes, and there are no gadgets.
Oh yeah, the American CIA agent drives.
He drives away.
And yeah.
Like, talk about how much money BMW probably paid them. The timeline too. They arrive with like 6 minutes to go before Goldeneye is about to go. Hey, if they didn't have an excursion, maybe having a little rendezvous in that little Cuba hut thing where they made love for 12 to 24 hours. Who knows how long they were there? They could have been there a week.
They could have been there a week. You would think that they would want to, get a move on.
No.
With things, but no, you have to have a sex scene. You have to have a sex scene.
Let's talk about the other side of the pond.
The American President, a story about Andrew Shepard, who is a widower who is running for re-election, falls in love with a woman by the name of Sydney Ellen Wade that works for the GDC, an environmental firm.
Mm-hmm.
In this film, he has to learn whether or not he follows his heart and does the right thing, or if he wants to be elected.
Really?
What do you think he did?
I think he followed his heart and gave a nice soliloquy at the end of the movie.
He did, very much so.
And Michael J. Fox at the end, when he decides, like, and you know what? We're going to get rid of handguns and AK-47s and rocket launchers. And Michael J. Fox is just like almost
so
crying.
Excited about it. I love this movie. It is based in no sort of reality whatsoever.
No, as Aaron Sorkin does.
Right, but there's something about the dialogue of it is really great. And it is emotional, it's romantic, and I'm just going to put this out on the record. There is not a more beautiful woman on screen in any film than Annette Bening in that blue dress when they go to the state dinner. Hands down.
That is an iconic... I've never seen this movie, but I was just waiting for that to happen.
Right.
Yeah, like anytime there's an Oscars montage or a movie montage,
Right.
I feel like that ends up...
Right.
And being in it at some point.
Right, but this film was looked over for a lot of the major awards, which I think was wrong.
Travesty.
Well, no, it was.
Here's my thought. It felt like Sleepless in Seattle or You've Got Mail in the White House.
No, it was deeper than that. It was deeper than that.
Aaron Sorkin. So I also would think of this as episode 0 of the West Wing.
Yeah, completely. I mean, you're just waiting for Martin Sheen's character to run for president again afterwards.
Apparently that is a thing. Like it's in the same universe. Like it takes place, and they refer to President Shepard in that show.
Really?
Yeah,
I did not realize
does
that.
take
Well,
place
I
in
need
the
to go
same
back and
universe.
watch The West Wing because I love this movie.
I really enjoyed the opening where it's showing the busts of the various presidents. You see Eisenhower, you see Jackson. You're setting yourself up to be admiring President Shepard as the president. Like, it respects the office in this movie. And right from the get-go, it sets the stage of how tough it is on a day-to-day basis to be the president.
I agree. I think that this movie captured that in a nice way through a romance, which clearly doesn't ever really happen. But it does hit on some really good points about the media and the presidency and how it's changed over time. The line about, if we didn't have television, there's no way that America would elect a man in a wheelchair, and how the presidency is different. He's not a president, he's a president on television. So there's extra things that you have to be cautious of and careful of.
And kind of an interesting point too, would he have gotten elected if he wasn't a widower?
Correct. They do sort of talk about that, and Martin Sheen's character basically just says it doesn't matter, we're here now.
Yeah,
so,
who cares?
I mean,
thanks for getting us in, bud.
We still got to do the job. So
I love the cabinet. I love the team dynamic. I liked I forget her name, but the character who's kind of feeding him the names of the
Janie, Samantha Mathis is his
I
assistant.
from somewhere.
She was in Little Women.
Yeah.
Yeah, she played Amy, old Amy, in the 1994 Little Women.
So, just the day-to-day. There's no free time. If you're going to schedule going to the bathroom, that has to be scheduled.
Time to see his daughter.
The weight of going from a state dinner or on a date to having to bomb another country.
Libya, yes.
And the implications that has. Domestic policy with gun control. You have global warming in there. You have a very 90s take on international affairs. Again, we're in that post-Soviet, everything ties together. We're in that post-Soviet world, and we're in a pre-Lewinsky world.
Yes, we are, yes.
And it kind of shows. I liked Rob Reiner's ability to be self-referential and say, hey, this is a movie, like referencing Frank Capra a couple of times.
Right, yes.
And I was like, this is kind of the Frank Capra movie of the 90s, because it would never happen in real life.
Well, and even particularly it's referenced in a moment where a woman, Winnie Malik's character, is talking to a security guard, and already she has a superiority about herself.
Oh, yeah.
And, she's like, well, he doesn't care, he doesn't know who Frank Capra is, he's just a working man. And the guy's like, hey, I know who Frank Capra is.
Listen here, buddy.
Right, like, you're not all the be-all to be-all just because you're a lawyer. I mean, there's those instances where I feel like what this movie does well is it sort of addresses issues that we have in our society in an idealistic way. Yes, it's in an idealistic way, but they're there and they're present enough for you to recognize them.
Very upfront with it.
Yes.
I like the quote, what is it? Your gas guzzling car will be an antique and a collector's item in 20 years. I'm like, here we are.
Here we are 20 years and we're still talking about global warming and we're still talking about gun control and it seems like we've never really figured it out.
It's hard to go back to that,
No, it is.
That pre-9/11.
Yes.
Pre-9/11, pre-Lewinsky. The worst thing that had happened in our country post-50s in that point was really Watergate. And Richard Dreyfuss's character, what a jerk.
Yeah, wow. He was like, she's a whore, she's sleeping around with everybody. And the interviewer's like, do you have anything to back it up? And he's like, well, let's just we're not talking about how I know this. Like, just total smoke screen, anything to sort of drive the nail in on his coffin, thus alluding to the dirtiness of politics.
We were pre-Bush too, but it was like Rumson, Rumsfeld, he looks like Cheney. I'm like, this guy, you could take him out. I'd like to see this character have his whole movie right now. I'd like to see a Rumson movie. But very, heavy language, but at the same time, it's not the politics of 2020.
No.
So the love story holds up. I enjoyed the back and forth between the two of them, but the politics again, I think it's dated. I know you love this movie.
I love this movie, and I think that the romance, it's really what sells this film. This is a romantic drama film.
Yeah.
It's not a political thriller. It's not drama. There's moments of light humor. There's moments of real sincerity. But it is a romance film. You watch this movie to see Michael Douglas and Annette Bening together, and they have excellent chemistry.
But overall, like I say, Michael Douglas, when they are sitting there kind of having their cutesy little date in the White House with the daughter, which the daughter, she is from
Little Giants.
Mm-hmm. Did she do anything else after this?
I think she was in a sitcom maybe immediately after.
That lasted 6 episodes.
Maybe. No. I'm not 100% sure.
But she was really good in this.
Right. The whole cast, top to bottom, was good. I can't think of a cast member where I didn't feel like they sold their character effectively and in a way that seemed genuine.
The running theme, for the last few episodes, has kind of been children actors having to really give it. They're all seasoned actors, right? We were talking about Christina Ricci. We were talking about
Kirsten Dunst,
Alicia Silverstone. A lot of young female actresses coming up. I guess the term now is actor, right? We just call them all actors.
Yes,
that's the thing. Sorry,
female actors.
Female actors coming up. In the 90s, and a lot of them are still kind of with us, but it kind of stinks. I want to look up more about her and see where she ended up after The Little Giants, which we won't be reviewing because that's 94.
Correct, yes, 1994.
But yeah, I don't know if I necessarily recommend this movie.
I recommend it wholeheartedly.
If you're a West Wing fanatic, which again, it's hard to go back and watch in this day and age because you just know it's an alternative universe. And it will never happen.
It will never happen, but it is still worth watching. And we haven't even really talked about how great Michael J. Fox is. And an actor who really doesn't do a whole lot anymore because of his Parkinson's, and sort of did a lot of really great television roles. It sort of makes you miss seeing him on the big screen in roles, more dramatic roles, and just a fantastic actor that I feel like we've forgotten about him a little bit as time has gone on, and he should make a comeback because he's wonderful.
I'm gonna sound like you. I love Michael J. Fox. Back to the Future 1, 2, and 3 probably in top 10 of my childhood. I go back and watch them; they still hold up. They're amazing films. I always picture him in that red puffy vest, and I was a weird kid and also watched Spin City, and he did really well in a political comedy / drama.
Right. Yeah.
And this is, I forget when Spin City started, 98?
Spin City started after this. Definitely.
Yeah, it was after.
Yeah. Maybe immediately after. I'm thinking 96, 97.
It's late 90s, or that 90s era.
Yeah.
But again, Michael J. Fox is really good in this movie, a minor character. A lot of big actors in small roles in this because the presidency is bigger than one person, even the president himself, and he couldn't do it without his team.
He couldn't do it without his team. And every member of that team created a character with the amount, Anna Deavere Smith, who was Speaker of the House, and David Paymer. They all didn't have a lot of screen time, but you remember them because of what they brought to those smaller roles.
Mahoney, who's the head of the GDC.
Yes, John Mahoney, great on Frasier for a really long time. Great cast.
And an Aaron Sorkin screenplay. And you can tell he's having fun with it and well thought out, and captures again, he gets the presidency in terms of its day-to-day workings and the team dynamic, and he doesn't make it boring.
Correct.
It's not boring.
It's not
Politics
boring at all.
is not boring. You're like, I could do this. I could go and I could be a lobbyist and have fun in DC.
Right.
So in the end, he drops the global climate, the reduction in emissions.
Correct.
And almost loses his girl.
He does, but then he realizes that doing the right thing is more important than being reelected. Where he says, I was too busy trying to keep my job that I wasn't doing my job, I think is a very pronounced statement of what I feel like a lot of us sort of see in the political arena or believe is going on. Probably, not just today, I feel like probably for a really long time, is that people just trying to keep their job, trying to be elected, as opposed to doing their job and doing the right thing. And I think in the end, he realized he needed to do the right thing, but it was a bonus that he got, his girlfriend back.
Being the president, you're, every decision affects not only
everyone. Correct.
Yeah, and your friends who have jobs. Like when you don't have the presidency, you don't have a job, and they're like, well, if you start dating, you're going to drop 5 points immediately.
Right.
You always have somebody around you at all times. You're never alone. Again, I don't know if I would recommend this as a political thriller or something. I would say, hey, here's a good love story. Remember that scene that you always see with the blue dress? Just this is where it came from.
Right.
And it kind of sets the tone for what is to come with the West Wing. So overall, a good movie. He recommends it. He loves it.
I would say it's the best movie we've seen so far this 1995 review year.
Better than Mallrats. I'm kidding.
I don't want to talk about Mallrats anymore.
Goldeneye. Play the video game from 1997 and 64. Unfortunately, I feel like half the movies I've recommended, I go back, I'm like, man, this is nowhere near as good as my 10-year-old self thought it was.
Goldeneye's not bad. It's not a waste of time to sit through and watch it.
It's kind of long. Again, 20-minute, too long.
But it's an enjoyable, sort of silly film. It did make me want to watch more. I'll put that out there.
Speaking of enjoyable, silly films, in 2 weeks coming up, we're going to be watching Mortal Kombat.
And one of the greatest science fiction movies of all time, 12 Monkeys, with Bruce Willis, Brad Pitt, and Madeline Stowe.
So, we'll see you then. Alright. If you could be a 00, what would your 00 number be?
It has to be a single digit?
It can be whatever you want. Just think about it. If you're a 00, what is it? It says a lot about you.
Well, my favorite number is 33.
So you're 0033?
I guess so, yeah.
I'd be 005.